here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays stories that I like to bring to you. Sorry, I don't even know. I'm just testing this out because my sound's not very good this evening. So it's like my third time trying to get on to you. So I'm going to wait for the guys in the live to let me know if the sound's okay. Otherwise, I'm just miming to myself. But I am going to start the story. If you want to forward, if this is a full story, then you're more than welcome to. Can you hear me? How's the sound? Can you hear me now? Any good? Any good? Oh, I don't know what to do if it's not going to work. If you'd like to join my Patreon, it's patreon.com/JessRose5472. Or does it, Gilly? Oh, that's good. Or I'm over on the TikTok, which is JessRose5472. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's positive. Oh, I didn't do anything different, but that's good to know. I'm over on the TikTok, or what was I going to say? Or you could subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you. There was a few. There was a few. There was Tiffany and Phil saying it, but when I watched it back, my one from Tuesday, which also was on this phone, the sound's not great. Sounds not great on it. I mean, how old's a Fold 2? It's not that old, is it? Really? It should be okay. I noticed the camera's a little bit teeny. When you watch it back, it looks a little bit different, but I thought it'd be okay. But yeah, I don't know what's going on tonight. But what was I saying when I came on? YouTube was really playing on. It's not old at all, sis. Scrub your lugs out, Phil. It was Tiffany as well. Tiffany couldn't hear me either. The Fold 2. I'm sure it's quite old, isn't it now? Aren't we on like the Fold 6 now? I think. Or I made that up. I'm sure we're on the Fold 6 now. But I'm a bit spoiled on my phones. It's old for me. Oh, that's terrible, isn't it? That's terrible. That's how spoiled I am. I'm very spoiled on the phones. But as long as we're up and running, I might start while we've got the opportunity. What do you think? What I'll do is I'm going to start the story, but if the sound does go at any point, can you just let me know? And if it catches my eye, I do see the comments, although sometimes I miss things, but please let me know. If it books me again, I'm hunting down YouTube CEO. I know, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. It's all gone a bit pear tonight. I was like, he does not want me to do a live this evening at all, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it, guys. It's not going to stop. It's not going to defeat us. We are doing this live, but I'm going to start now, okay? Because obviously I think we're about 15 minutes over as it is. And I don't want it to cut off or anything. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what YouTube's got planned for us this evening. So I'm going to start. So I'm going to do my second intro now, if that's okay. And I will leave you all to it. All right? So, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, see, stop. See, compliments distract me. They distract me. Right, okay, I'm going. Okay. Right, okay. Where am I? Get in it. Come on. I think it's because I'm doing it so quickly tonight. I'm not prepared. Normally I relax into it. Okay. Third time. Get in it. Bah. Oh my God. Tyler's back. How you doing, Tyler? How are you? I'm getting on with the story now, so I can't reply to you. Oh, Tiffany's in. All right, I'm getting on with it now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays are my... What's going on, guys? Oh, God. Tyler, you got to stop. Yeah, you gotta stop. Listen to the story. Listen to me tell the story if you want. You gotta stop. I hope you're okay though. But I'm very distracted. Right. Oh, well, that's very nice. Hey, Mum. Hey, Mama Bear. How you doing? How are you? I don't think Mum can hear me. Warwick, I don't know how he does it. It's only me and Tiffany that can see the comments. It looks like we're talking to ourselves. It's terrible, but I think that might be it now. I know, Phil. That's what I was just saying. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know how that happens. But I think it's just me and Tiffany. I think because Tiffany's a mod, but I don't know how he's doing it. Right. Okay. I'm gonna begin now. Right. No more distractions. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays, the stories that I like to bring to you. I'm also over on the Patreon. Can you see him then? Right. Oh my goodness. Wow. Right, okay. Right, I'm doing it. I don't know what's going on. Right, okay. Whew, let's go. Let's do it. Okay, I've got to try and keep a straight face now. This is terrible. Right, guys. I'm going to begin now. I'm going to go. All right. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays are stories that I like to bring to you. I'm also over on the TikTok, which is Jess Rose 5472, or you could join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Jess Rose 5472, or you could just subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Or even drop a like, or just watch. That'd be great too. So tonight's story is a story I've covered before. I actually covered it 6 years ago. And I checked it today. The quality of the video is obviously horrific from 6 years ago. Also, there have been a couple of updates since I did the story, and maybe a couple of things that I hadn't caught at the time. So I thought I would do the brutal Sophie Lancaster and Robert Maltby story for you this evening. Okay, so Sophie Lancaster, born on the 26th of November 1986 in Lancashire, England. It's a UK story. Her mum, Sylvia Lancaster, her dad, John Lancaster. She also had a brother, I believe he was older. Okay. Now, lovely girl. Really, really sweet girl. I saw photos of her when she was younger, but she was very quiet. She was quite shy. Very kind. It did make me laugh because she became a vegetarian when she was 6, which I just find it shows what type of person she was, to be like, no, I'm not. And it wasn't, you do have kids where they're like, oh no, once they find out where meat comes from, so they're like, oh no. But as soon as a chicken nugget's put in front of them, or, a turkey dinosaur, they're back on the meat again. But Sophie didn't. She stayed a vegetarian from then on. So it showed she genuinely was. She was a sweet girl. She cared for everything and everyone. She just seemed like a really nice girl. Now she went to Haslington High School. And her mum, Sylvia, said that when she turned about 12, apparently she'd gone to her friends for the summer holidays and she was due to come home, but she phoned and she wanted to stay. So she ended up staying at her friend's house for the entire summer holidays. And when she come home, she changed her look a little bit. Okay. Now, what we would call it, I don't know if it's still the name for it now, but then it was called a goth look. It was called a gothic look. Okay. Now I think it's gone through different name changes. I think you've got emo, maybe. I don't know much about that, if that's the equivalent. I'm not too sure, but it was a gothic look, and it was sort of darker makeup, darker clothes, um, you know, different colours in your hair. It was just a way of expressing yourself, just like, at the time, when she was doing it, the more, what would you say, mainstream look was chav, tracksuit bottoms, trainers, slick back hair, which must have looked to the people dressing gothic, that must have looked just as, like, oh God, all right, okay, is that what you're wearing? So it's just an alternative way that she decided to express herself. And her mum actually said, Sylvia actually said, that when she walked in, her first thought was, God, you look really cool, which is nice that her mum was so accepting, because I think sometimes if you see black nail varnish and thick black makeup and, dark clothes and, a certain look, some parents would be like, oh, but her mum was she just thought it was cool, she said. And she found that it was like Sophie had found herself. This was her way of expressing herself, and she started getting like piercings and things like that. But she was happy. She was happy, and that's all Sylvia wanted for it. That's all Sylvia wanted for her. So now, at age 17, okay, so it's 17/18, she met Robert Maltby, and apparently this was through friends. And Robert, he comes across as quite a quiet guy as well, but they just hit it off straight away. Now, Robert himself, he was born in 1986, same year as Sophie, in Lancashire as well. And in 2007, okay, he at this point is turning 21 around this point. He's a bit older than Sophie, I believe. Now, Robert's also a goth, if you like. But Sophie and Robert and a lot of the goth community, if you like, they don't like being called that. Sophie didn't like that name anyway. She didn't like that title. And neither did Robert. They more seen it as being an individual, being alternative. That was how they saw themselves. Okay. So from the outside, it was like, oh, goth. But for themselves, they just saw it as being not with the mainstream, not following certain cultural norms, okay, if you like. And they got on really well. And their friend says they were so well suited. They were a really, really sweet couple. They'd spend a lot of times with their friends, but for the most part, it was just them two together, and they just got on very, very well. Now, as I said, we've got to 2007. Robert is turning 21. Sophie would turn 21 this year. And she was getting ready to start at Accrington and Rossendale College to do an English degree. Okay. Now, by this point, the couple had moved in together, and they were living in Bacup in Rossendale, Lancashire. And they were planning for their future. They were talking about what they would do, whether they get married in, not in the immediate future, I believe. I think they both had plans with what they wanted to do with their lives, but it was together. They knew they wanted to be together in whatever they chose to do. Now, in this area, Bacup, where they were living, goths weren't treated very nicely because for the most part, the youth that lived there were chavs. That's what they were. That was how they dressed. Now, was I a chav? Yes, I was. Yes, I was. But I don't think I was particularly going with that look. I just like to dress in trainers and jeans or joggers. It's just how I dressed. I was just comfortable that way. So I suppose I would be classed as a chav as well. And it was seen now because I'm living in a multicultural city, you know, to see a chav or a goth or, you know, someone from a rock, a fashion, not background, but someone dressing up as a rocker or, you know, because we're in a multicultural city, you know, seeing different people it's not unusual, you know, so you don't really stand out, really. But in Baker, it was called on the show that I watched. I've watched a few shows on this, and on one particular show that I watched, it was called a monoculture, which basically means that whereas we're in a multiculture, they're in a monoculture. So it's everyone really dresses the same. That's how they do it. So for the most part, the youth around that area were chavs. They all dressed the same. So the goths or the alternative subculture that were living there, they did stand out. And they kind of became this this them and us type mentality, really. And a couple of Robert and Sophie's friends had been attacked during that year, you know, for no other reason than how they looked, like no other reason. So it wasn't a great place if you did want to express yourself differently to the mainstream, okay, which sounds awful. Now we get to Friday, the 10th of August 2007, and Sophie, as I've said, who's 20, and Robert, who is now 21, they'd spent the evening at a friend's house. They'd had a couple of drinks. It was said they wasn't drunk by any means. They'd only had a couple. But they'd just had a nice evening. It's just said they were socialising with their friends, okay? Now, they decided to walk home. All right. It says it was a 2-mile walk home, but it was a nice walk. Where they lived was a nice place. It just seemed it was going through a stage of the teenagers who were all growing up at that point. They were just boredom was kicking in. They were getting up to no good. It was just going through a not too safe period of time at that point, okay? But they decided to walk home. And this was just after 11 p.m. All right. Now, as they're getting nearer the city centre, they stop off at a petrol station, said to get some cigarettes, okay? And while they're in there, they get chatting to a few teenagers. I think there might have been a couple of lads, but it was mainly the girls. And the girls that they were talking to were absolutely fascinating, mainly with Sophie's look. Now, I've heard that Robert say that night they weren't dressed in gothic attire, but Sophie did have sort of black and red dreadlocks. She was a very pretty girl. She was only tiny. I've heard she wasn't even 5 foot. She was quite diddy. You know, Robert himself wasn't a massive, daunting dude. I don't know where I got dude from, but you know, they were just a really sweet couple, but they did have piercings, you know, like I say, she had red and black dreadlocks, you know, darker makeup. And these girls were just fascinated with her piercings. They were asking about her and Robert, you know, what they were into. And these girls just seemed genuinely intrigued by the pair. All right. So the group invited the couple to join them for a few drinks or a drink in Stubby Lee Park. Now, Stubby Lee Park apparently is a beautiful park, but the kids had begun to take it over in the nights. And when I say kids, there was big groups of kids that used to congregate in this park, mainly in the skate ramp section of the park, because it's quite far in, away from the, eyes of the police or parents and things like that. And they all used to congregate in this skate park bit. And they invited Sophie and Robert to come and join them. And the group that invited them genuinely were just interested in them. There was no ulterior motive in it. They weren't getting them there under false pretenses. They were just, they liked them. They were getting on. So Sophie, Robert, and the group walked to the skate ramps part of the park, as I've mentioned. And when they get there were other groups there. Quite loud, though. A few of them were quite drunk. They'd been drinking for quite a few hours, a few of them had. Now, one of these particular groups were headed by two lads, Ryan Herbert and Brendan Harris. Okay. Now, these two lads were 15 years old. That's what I mean. These are young teenagers. Okay. Now, these two, not very nice boys at all, really. They were known for being troublemakers. Like I say, they were the head of a particular gang, known for fighting, just not very nice kids, violent, the typical ASBO kids, if you know of that particular time. I don't even know if ASBO is still a thing, but they definitely would have ticked that box. And they were in this particular group. They were very drunk, but it had said they'd been already having sex in the park earlier on that night, which is lovely. But it said that Ryan himself, sober, wasn't too bad a lad, but drunk. It said he switched up and he became a very angry drunk. He's 15. I mean, you just don't associate that with a 15-year-old, do you? But apparently he was. Now, Sophie and Rob, they sat away from Ryan, Brendan, and these lads. They weren't near them in this area. And the girls and a couple of the lads who were talking to them, that, apparently the atmosphere was quite friendly. It was all quite nice, and like I say, they were staying away from Ryan and Brendan. They had nothing to do with that particular group. But Ryan and Brendan, they didn't like the attention that Rob and Sophie were getting. Now, I don't know if it was the girls that were talking to the couple they felt they were taking away the attention that these girls perhaps were showing to them. I'm not too sure, but it is said there was some sort of jealousy with the attention that Rob and Sophie were getting, which is crazy. They're older. It's quite obvious they're not there to step on their, on their grounds or anything. It was innocent, but they grab their attention, like I say, and the atmosphere changes very, very quickly, really quickly. No one's seen it coming, and it went from a very friendly atmosphere, and everyone had said they were having a really good night. It was a Friday night, and there was big groups in that park. There was at least 30 kids in that park at that point. And out of nowhere, Brendan comes running over and punches Rob straight in the face. No reason. None. And for, like I say, for no reason whatsoever, other than they looked maybe different. The entire group that Brendan and Ryan were with start beating Rob. They all start laying in. And there was at least 5, but there's between 5 and 15 lads that jumped on Robert that night. And he was very quickly knocked to the ground. They're kicking him, punching him, they're stomping on him, they're jumping on his head. Look, these are vile young lads. And it was said that because there was an audience, that gave them that would give them the need to keep going and to escalate. You know, it was said that had there not been as many people there, or had they not been egging each other on, it might not have gone the way it went. But because it was like a perfect storm that evening of alcohol, big groups, then you've got this couple who supposedly stand out. It was just this concoction and it just blew. All right. Now, the other kids around who were, they weren't involved, but they I suppose they felt they couldn't stop them either, and neither could Sophie. Now, if you remember, I said she's tiny. She's just under 5 foot, I believe, but she's a slight girl, right? And she was begging them to stop. And at this point, Rob's unconscious on the floor. They're still kicking him. The guy's unconscious. He's out. And they're still laying into him. Well, eventually they move away. And this allows Sophie to get to him. And she was basically cradling. This is the love of this girl's life. She's 20 years old. He's only 21. And she's cradling his head in her lap and begging for help. Okay? And it says that it shows who she was as a person. Because even Sylvia, her mum, after the fact, she said, why didn't she run? Why didn't she run there and then? But maybe she thought because Rob was a man and she was a girl, maybe she'd be okay. You know, maybe she didn't care. Maybe she was going to go help Rob regardless whether she thought anything could happen to her or not. It just said she was very, very brave. Okay. So she's cradling his head. She's begging for help. And then they come back. All right. But Sophie has her head. Sophie has her back to these lads. All right. As they're heading back. And because she's holding Rob, there's a lot of noise. She's shouting, you know, for help. She's not aware that they're coming up behind her, right? And she doesn't hear, I believe it was Brendan again, but it could have been any one of them. But they came running up, and drop kicked her in the back. She didn't even see it coming, right? And then Ryan, Brendan, and apparently 3 of the lads just begin beating her. Look, savagely beating her. And it appeared that what they'd done to Rob, not only did they want to do to her, but they wanted to take it even further. They were kicking her. They were stomping on her head. But after the fact, detectives were saying that they saw Rob and Sophie as less than them. They just didn't see their lives as important at all. So they could do this. Yes, she was a girl. Yes, she was tiny. But the normal rules didn't apply to not hitting a girl. because she wasn't important. She was less than them. And they began kicking her head like a football, it was said. Like a football. Just taking coming back, taking a few paces back, and then running up like you would take a kick of a ball. Just utterly horrendous. Now, the witnesses were terrified. The witnesses are the other kids, okay, that were there in the park at the time. Like I say, they were just having a fun Friday night. I've got to admit, these are very young teenagers. Why are they out by this point? This has gone into the early hours now. Why are they out at this time? But they were apparently they were doing no harm originally and just having a good time. Now, they were all terrified, but one girl, one young girl, she calls 999. Now, she calls 999 while the attack is still happening. And if you listen to the call, can you make out exactly what's going on in the call? No. But when you realise that behind that very young girl, I've heard she was only 13, when you hear behind that terrified girl's voice begging for the ambulance to come to help them, you can hear noises in the background. And you're like, is that it? Is that noise like them kicking her? Or, you start to try and think, is that what I'm hearing? Because apparently, even though they saw her on the phone, they didn't care. They just kept on. They kept going. Now, I don't know if they knew she called 999. I don't know if they were cocky enough to think that would never have happened, or they genuinely just didn't care. But when the ambulance arrives, and you do hear this young girl on the phone, she sounds so young, and she's crying and she's screaming, and she's like, they can't find us, on about the ambulance. And the operator on the end of the phone, she's like, look, they'll find you, just stay on the phone, just calm down, I need you to calm down, because she was hysterical, quite rightly. All right. But when the ambulance does arrive towards where they can get to, where the paramedics can get to Rob and Sophie, Roy and Brendan and their group had run. They'd gone. Of course they had. They're not going to stick around. They're not going to stick around, are they? They're not brave enough to do that. No, they're only brave enough to kick around a young, petite girl, and a boyfriend who wouldn't hurt a fly. No, but when other men, and there's a few of them, arrive, they're gone. Then they're gone. They're not sticking around then. And when the paramedics got there, they couldn't even tell the genders of the two people in front of them. They were so badly beaten, especially Sophie. They couldn't even tell what gender they were. They didn't know. Now they were rushed to hospital, barely breathing, just hanging on to life, just about. All right. So I just think it was just thanks to this girl phoning the ambulance, because they certainly weren't going to phone anyone for help. Now, on Saturday, the 11th of August 2007, so this would have happened in the early hours of that morning. Now, this is a little bit later. This is later on in that morning. Sylvia, Sophie's mum, she'd actually gone shopping that morning. She's not aware of anything. She's going about a normal weekend. She doesn't know anything. And when she comes home, she opens her front door and there's a card, that has been put through her letterbox. And when she looks, it's asking for her to ring Burnley police station. She's like, what's going on? Of course, she phones and she finds out. And she said her life as it was stopped then. She said everything that she'd known before then stopped. Okay. And everything after that call, when she found out about Sophie, that's her life after. She said, and you've just got to carry on. She goes, but they're two different lives, right? And basically she gets to the hospital, and she sees the state that they've left her daughter in, and she's crying, her husband's crying, Sophie's brother's crying. So the nurse was crying. She said she just couldn't believe what she was looking at. She was practically unrecognisable. You know, her whole head had swelled up. Have seen photos. She actually released a photo after a couple of days publicly to show what these cretins had done to her daughter. But at that particular moment, she couldn't believe what she was looking at. Like I say, Sophie, the majority of her injuries were to her face and her head. Her dreadlocks, remember I mentioned she had, they weren't long, they were probably to about here, so black and red. There was clumps that had been ripped out of her head. She had black eyes. There was trainer marks that had been left on her face. That's how hard they'd been kicking her in her face. Yeah. You know, her arms and her legs and her back especially was bruised from where she'd been drop kicked into it. But most of the damage was directed at her head and her face. Now, initially, it was believed that Rob was in the worst state of the two, and Sophie had CAT scans on her head. There was no brain damage at that point. They believed, although she was on life support, that the injuries weren't life-threatening and she would be okay. So the next day, they take her off life support, and she sits up, and Sylvia says it was as she'd got there that they just took her off life support. And like I say, Sophie sits up, and she said she started being sick, but she was just saying no. And the way she was moving her hands, she said Sylvia's words were, "I'm not a doctor, but I could see there was something wrong. There was something really, really wrong." Now, don't forget, she'd been told there was no brain damage to her daughter. She was badly hurt, but there was no brain damage and she should be okay. Well, at this point, all right, so that was Sophie in the hospital. Hospital were trying to keep her stable, all right. Now, from on the other side, the police at this point, they'd started investigating straight away. This was a horrific crime that made national news very, very quickly, okay, and eventually went on to make international news. You know, this was seen as a hate crime. It was seen as a hate crime. It was seen that this was done because this couple looked different, and for no other reason. All right. So the police begin investigating. They start getting the names and they start interviewing. Apparently, there was over 100 people they interviewed, and they whittled it down to about 30 kids who'd been at the park that night. But they came up against what was called a wall of silence. Now, I've seen many occasions of this. One of them being where the dramatisation that was done on a lad by the name of Jamie Rowe. I think he's like Jamie Rowe, and that was actually called Wall of Silence. And the dad in that was played by is it James Nesbitt? Is it James? And that's a horrific crime, and it's in these smaller towns where fear sets in, and no one, you know, these lads are out there. These lads, you know, they're out, and apparently they were bragging. You know, people knew what happened. Everyone knew what happened, but no one was going to talk to the police. Nobody. The police were having a real problem. But eventually, with the help of a reporter, like a local reporter that was around there, who had befriended a couple of the kids around there, a couple of the parents of these kids and stuff, a few names got put forward to the police. 5 names. And these names were Ryan Herbert, Brendan Harris, Daniel Mallett, and Joseph and Danny Hume. Now, Ryan, Brendan, Daniel, and I believe Joseph, all 15. And I think Danny was either 14 or 16 at the time. Okay. Now, Joseph and Danny are brothers, as I've said. And just horrific. Just absolutely horrific, these 5 were. Now, it said that Daniel kind of was a bit quieter than the others. But they were all quite cocky. These lads were all quite cocky. They really were. They didn't care. There was no remorse out of them. There was no worrying about how Sophie and Rob were. You know, there was none of that. Now, remember I said Rob was seen as being the worst off out the 2 when they were brought into the hospital. But Rob was starting to improve. Sophie was getting worse. She really was. And on the 5th day, they took her down to do, you know, another test. Remember, I said her mum was saying there's something not right with her. And the CT scan showed that now she did have brain damage. Now, I don't know, was it because they took her off life support too soon? I don't know, because apparently the original test showed that she hadn't got brain damage. I don't know how that worked. I'm not too sure. Maybe it's the swelling covering it up. I don't know. But by the 5th day, yes, she had incurred quite severe brain damage. Now, the police, because it really wasn't looking very good for Sophie now, and she was in an induced coma. Okay. Like I say, it wasn't looking good for her. The police did something that they very, very rarely do, and they wanted to do a post-mortem of Sophie's injuries, even though she was alive. Okay. And it was because it looked like she wasn't going to make it from her injuries. But of course, her injuries are starting to heal. Or, you know, she had, I mean, you should have saw her ears. Her ears were like triple the size that they were, you know, that they should have been from being kicked. Oh, it's just such a shame. It really was. But these injuries are starting to heal. So Sylvia Agrezi and her husband, you know, Sophie's dad, they agree to it. And a pathologist is brought in to have a look at Sophie's injuries and to catalogue them, and, you know, to try and see how the injuries, because the pathologist can see how the course of events may have happened with regards to her injuries. And what the pathologist could tell from the injuries to Sophie's head and her face is that there would have been a simultaneous kicking to her head from 2 different directions. And that's what had really done the damage. Because had it been from one direction and just sent her head in, you know, the other way, apparently that wouldn't have been, of course it would have been horrific, and we know, you know, that can be fatal. I'm not saying it's not, but they were saying that the real fatal damage for Sophie was the fact that there would have been 2 people kicking her in the head at the exact same time. That's what they've said. And that's what the pathologist could see. So the police at this point knew they were looking for at least 2 people who had definitely, they could prove that it was at least 2. They knew it was more, but you have to have evidence for that. All right. Now, Sylvia, over the next 13 days, she begged for the machines to be turned off. Well, I say over the next 13 days. It was on day 5, so say for the next 8 days. She begged for the machines to be turned off. She said that Sophie's body had just begun to swallow, and she just said Sophie would have hated it. She would have hated to have been like that. Obviously, she couldn't eat, she couldn't talk, there was nothing there, and she said Sophie would have hated this. She would have. So the family just they said, look, it's time, all right, which would have been awful. Now at this point, Rob had actually come out of his coma. He came out of his coma after a week, all right, and this poor lad, imagine coming out of a coma. Not, I presume at first you wouldn't know what was going on, and then as things are coming back to you, and then you want to go and see the love of your life and see what they did to her after you'd been knocked unconscious. I can't imagine that. I can't even imagine how he felt. I genuinely can't. Because he wouldn't have known. He wouldn't have known that. Don't forget, she was okay. He was the first to be attacked. So he wouldn't have known that they'd gone on to do that to her. Just awful. Just absolutely awful. So what Sylvia did, she invited all Sophie's friends and family members, and of course Rob, who was still in the hospital, to come round and sit with Sophie, before they agreed for the life support to be turned off. And they all sat there and, for a little while discussing memories of Sophie and, places they'd gone together, all together and stuff. And just a way of them all saying goodbye to their friend. And it said she was really loved. She really was. It shows just what a lovely girl she was. And then on the 24th of August 2007, 13 days after the attack, Sophie dies in Sylvia's arms. She said, well, after they turned the machines off, it took about 20 minutes. And she said it was like 1 minute she was there, and the next minute she felt her go. She said it was the weirdest feeling. She goes, but you could feel her leave. Just utterly heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. Especially walking in to see your daughter like that, but then initially being told, don't worry, she'll be okay. She'll be all right. Not meant emotionally, of course there's going to be, trauma, but she'll be okay. And then over the next 2 weeks, just watching her deteriorate must have been, just awful. So, as I've said, did I say they brought the 5 in? I don't even know if I've said that. I'm sure I did. They brought the 5 in. They were arrested. Now, Ryan, Brendan, Daniel, Joseph and Danny were originally charged with GBH, 2 counts, okay? 1 for Sophie, 1 for Rob. After Sophie passed, the charges were changed to murder, obviously of Sophie, and GBH of Rob, okay? And now witnesses at this point, after Sophie's passed away, and like I say, this has made not just national news, this has made international news, okay? Sophie's photos in the newspaper, because obviously Sylvia had released it. She wanted people to know. Witnesses do start coming forward, okay, who were there that night, which is so brave, again, like I say. Now, the evidence that the police had got, which they'd struggled with at first, they were getting witnesses coming forward, but they need evidence. Now, they found blood on Ryan's clothes and on his trainers, on the bottom half of his bottoms and his trainers, and it was said the only way that this could be there is if he was in a pool of Sophie's blood or he'd been kicking her at the time. So, they had evidence against him. But they were having trouble with regards to Brendan. They were having real trouble because they knew these were the main two, but they were having trouble getting Brendan. So what they did, they stuck Brendan and Ryan in the same police van, and they put a listening device in there, which has been done so many times. I never get why they don't think that's going to happen. And the two lads start talking, and basically they start discussing it. And what they're discussing, now by this point, these two boys know Sophie's died of her injuries. They know. And they start discussing kicking her in her head. Kicking her in her head like a football. That's what they're discussing. No remorse whatsoever. Now, on the 14th of September 2007, the five, okay, so Daniel, Joseph, and Danny were all charged with GBH, and by this point, Ryan and Brendan had been charged with murder and GBH. And the three had also been charged because it was classed as joint enterprise. So because the police had to use that because they couldn't pinpoint who had caused the fatal blow. Okay. Now they all pled not guilty. Of course they did. But then we get to March 2008 when the trial's about to start. And on the first day of the trial, Ryan pleads guilty. He decides to plead guilty to his charges. So the other four, including Brendan Harris, their lawyers and them themselves are like, well, he's taking the blame, so can we go? That was the attitude, really. They thought, well, they've got him now, so well, you might as well just let us go. But no, that wasn't what was going to happen, okay? The reason that didn't work was the three, Daniel, Joseph, and Danny, they kept their charges of GBH on Robert. But Brendan, he was still remained charged with murder because of the pathologist and because of the police's forward thinking, is all I can say, to do a post-mortem on Sophie before she'd actually passed away, while the injuries were still there, and that pathologist proved that there had to have been two of them at the same time kicking Sophie from either side. And that's how they could also prove Brendan was guilty of murder, or charged with murder anyway. So the results come in. The results? That's not right, is it? The results? I know I'm not wording that right, but they're all found guilty of their charges. Okay, they're all found guilty. Now they're all sentenced in April 2008. The judge called them feral thugs. Said there was no remorse out of them. He had no time for these guys whatsoever. He says even animals wouldn't do what you did. Even animals only do kill for food. They wouldn't have done what you did. Now Ryan and Brendan. So we have Ryan Herbert. He was sentenced to life with a minimum of originally 16 years, which was okay. So originally 16 years. I'm going to say that. Okay. Then Brendan Harris, he was also sentenced to life with a minimum of 18 years. Okay. Then we have Daniel, given 4 years, Daniel Mallet. And then Joseph and Danny Hume, the brothers, they were given 5 years apiece. Okay. Which is, it's just, but apparently given the lack of evidence towards those three and everything else, apparently they weren't I just think it's just disgraceful, but apparently that's what you would expect for the evidence they had and who came forward. Okay. Now appeals, of course, they all appealed, all of them. They all got turned down except for, and that's where I got a little bit confused earlier, except for Ryan Herbert. Now, don't forget he pled guilty, and his appeal, his sentence was dropped to 15 years. Okay, so that was their sentences. Now Sylvia, it said from pretty much straight away, she said, I could have either just sat on the sofa and just vegged out and just, as I've said, just crawl into a hole and just not want to see anybody. Okay. But she doesn't. And she sets up the Sophie Lancaster Foundation. And it's a charity where she goes into schools and she talks about inclusivity of, you know, of societies, people in society's differences, and, you know, just explaining, you know, I think she showed photos of a daughter at one particular school, and, you know, one of the kids was like, and it was where she's got the red dreads and she's there and she's kind of holding a bottle, and I think they were like, oh, she must like to drink. It was, you know, all she was doing was holding, I think it was WKD bottle, and it was like, oh, she looks a bit scary. And, you know, these were type on first impressions that these kids got from just a photo. So it shows these automatic opinions that are struck in a split second. And she's out there and she's talking to these kids and she's going, like, you know, explaining that you can't judge people like that. You can't just judge people by just the makeup they wear or the clothes they've got on. You know, you can't do that, or the piercings or tattoos, you know. And she's spent, you know, she spent the past 18 years, you know, working so hard, and she says, I'll continue to do it, you know, for the rest of my life, you know, just trying to bring about these changes. Now, there was a acronym of Sophie's name that was done, with regards to this charity, and it was called Stamp Out Prejudice, Hatred and Intolerance Everywhere. And obviously it's an acronym of Sophie's name. I just thought it was lovely. She said her friend had come up with that. Now, in 2013, Greater Manchester Police became the first to monitor and record hate crimes and incidents against people from alternative subcultures. Now, other forces have followed this legislation, and what it means is, obviously, hate crimes are classed as crimes against someone because of their gender or because of their race or their sexuality, you know, their religion. And it was to bring into that group that are protected, you know, people from alternative subcultures of society, and it was to bring them into that protection of it being classed as a hate crime, because obviously Sophie and Rob's attack was classed as a hate crime because it was believed the only reason these lads went after them was because they classed them as goths, and someone said they saw them as lower than themselves, which is crazy. Now in 2014, Sylvia was awarded an OBE for all her work that she's done. We got in 2017 now, Rob. You know, he's like a shallow the lad he was. He's still living at home with his parents, just round the corner from the park where Stubbley Park where it happened. Now there was a show where he was working with the producers. It was called Murder for Being Different. And he really didn't like it. He didn't like that how his life now is he's just seen as the man who was beaten. It's like his identity's been taken from him. He also doesn't see it. He doesn't believe it was a hate crime. He doesn't see it as a hate crime. He just sees them as being assholes. I don't normally swear, but that was the term that was used. You know, he sees them as just prats, and he believes that giving the excuse of a hate crime and that it was because they were goths is kind of giving an excuse to what was done that night, rather than it just being that they were just rotten. They were just rotten boys, and there really wasn't a reason, because it seems to be giving that reason, and he doesn't think that that should be happening. There shouldn't be a reason given, because he doesn't believe there was one. He doesn't even believe it was because he says they weren't dressed in their normal sort of attire, their dark side. They were just dressed like everyone else, really. It was just they had piercings, and Sophie had obviously the dreadlocks in her hair. He goes, but you know, we didn't look that much difference then. So he doesn't believe it was because of that. He doesn't even give that credit to them. Okay. He just he said that he is still you know, working in art and stuff, but he no longer wears goth fashion, which is a real shame if that's how he expressed himself. You know, it is a real shame. Now Daniel, Joseph, and Danny were all released after, I think, in 2012 and 2013. The Daniel 2012, and then Joseph and Danny in 2013. So they're out and about, living their best life. Well, I don't know, but they're living their lives. Now Ryan Herbert, his sentence was reduced by another year, down to 14 years. And this was for apparently good behaviour while he'd been inside. Now, when he'd been in the young offenders, because don't forget these were only 15, when he'd been there, apparently his behaviour wasn't great. But once he got moved to adult prison, apparently he fixed up a little bit. You know, he started taking classes, started being, like I say, good behaviour. Oh, I just don't know. I just don't know. I know he was young, but I can't. I can't. You know, the rehabilitation argument. I just, I do get torn in these cases, because it's like, do you get a child, which they were all children? Do you just lock them up and throw away the key? Just throw them away? Which I know in America there are many cases of that. Or do you try and rehabilitate them, and you know, and try and get them to see the error of their ways and then become a functioning member of society? I just no, I just don't. It's just when you see what they did to this girl. But Ryan Herbert was freed, and that's why I've done this story as well, because like I said, I did the story in 2019. He was actually freed in 2022. So he's out. Okay. He actually done 15 years. Well, it wasn't, it was 14 years because he was locked up in 2008, wasn't it? So we did only do the 14 years. Now, Brendan Harris, I've got being due for parole later this year into 2026. Okay. So he'll be out soon too as well. So that means that the 5 of them who murdered Sophie, a young 21-year-old girl, and ruined Rob's life. Now, I'm not saying he won't go on to, you know, live a good life. I'm not saying that, but it's a stain over his life. And he says, you know, he feels that that's all he's known for now, as being the lad who was beaten in the park, whose girlfriend was murdered. It's a real shame. And these 5 will just be out living their lives. And they were so young when it happened. You know, they can go on now to live a perfectly normal life, have children, get married. You know, it's really, really sad. It really, really is. I just don't think it's on. I don't think it's fair at all. But then again, like I say, do you get these children and throw away the key? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it at all. But that was the brutal Sophie Lancaster and Robert Maltby story. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really torn on that. I genuinely am. I just don't think I should have got out. They certainly shouldn't have got out as quick as they did. Although 14 years to a 15, it's a long time. But is it long enough? I just don't know. But thank you so much for joining me again. I really do appreciate it. I'm here. Oh, excuse me. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays I'm requesting, Thursdays are stories that I like to bring to you. It'd be great if you could subscribe or drop a like in there. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me. I genuinely appreciate it. I really do. And I'll be back next Tuesday. Thank you so much again. Thank you. Take care. Oh, how are we, guys? God, I started getting really, really hot towards the end there. How are we? Oh, thanks, Jilly. Thank you. How are we all, guys? Just, do you know, that's the second time I've done that story, and it doesn't get any easier. It really doesn't. It's just so sad. And the fact that the main one of them is out now, it's just very, very sad. What are we on about? Oh, is Jessica not here? Has Jessica not joined us? Is Mum still here, or is she gone? Mum wouldn't be here for that long, would she? I did see her here for a little while when I was talking. And what happened with Tyler? Did Tyler come back or not? Was that it? I can't believe I'm fanning myself with my notes. It's terrible. But my fan lost its mind. So obviously I had to put that out. Couldn't use that. So yeah, but how are we all, guys? How are we? Why is no one talking to me? Where have you gone? Talk to me. Where have you gone? Why is no one talking to me now? Oh, there we go. Oh, thank you, Phil. That's lovely. I know Jilly had written. Thank you, Jilly. But I was like, where's everyone? Oh, hi, Natalie. How you doing? Are you just joining, or have you watched the story? I was going to say, because I finished. Literally just finished. How are you? Are we okay? Oh, God. I've got so hot, and I couldn't help moving around. Oh, you did? Awful, isn't it? Such a shame. Oh, thank you, Warwick. Thank you. Where's your YouTube wifey? Where is she? Oh, there she is. Still here, but I know that we'll have to go. Oh no. Oh, tell him Auntie Jess will come and fight her for him if she wants. I shouldn't say that. No, just tell him Auntie Jess sends big loves. Big loves. Yeah, I gotta admit, our school, I think it was like I was saying, because Birmingham's so big, our school had a real mixture, and you just didn't really take any notice. You all just kind of got on. You know, I think the only difference is, you know, you might like different music. Like, I was a boy band. I love boy bands. And, like, one of my friends, who's a real rocker, she calls me a plastic. Ah, thank you. Thanks, sis. Take care. Give me big hugs for me. Yeah, she calls me a plastic. I don't know if you've ever watched Mean Girls with the plastics with Regina George. That's what she calls me. I can't be further from that, but because of her being sort of, she likes a heavy metal and she's like a rocker and she goes into mosh pits and, you know, this kind of thing. I suppose the fact that I like boy bands and stuff, and when I go out, when I used to go out, should I say, back in the day, I used to put eyelashes on, and I don't know why I was called a plastic, to be honest. I don't really think I did anything different. So there was nothing really major about how I used to dress. But yes, I was she'd refer to me as the plastics. Me and Tiffany were the plastics. So but yeah, I don't say, I can't say I ever looked any different. I think when I was really little, don't forget I was born at the end of the 70s. So in the 80s, you would notice there'd be punk rockers with, you know, the spikes, the sort of green spikes, like rocker does. But because of the young ones with Rick Mail and Adrian Edmondson, like, you were even as a kid, I was aware of like rockers. So you'd look, but just through being intrigued, I think. It wasn't like, oh, you were more like interested. So yeah, I don't get that mentality. I genuinely don't. Call it like, I see it. Oh, okay, Phil. Thank you. Yes, me too. It has. I'm looking at the time, but I forget that I'm already 10 minutes behind what we're looking at now. So thank you so much for joining me, guys. I am going to let you all go. I really do appreciate it. I'm back on Tuesday. And I will see you all then. But if you could like, comment, and subscribe, guys, I'd really appreciate it. I'd like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be great. That'd be excellent. And thank you to, I was in 94. I was 15, turning 16. That's when I finished school. Finished school in 94. Yes. Old bird I am. So yes, that was the year I finished school. That was the year I finished school and I started working. Yeah, started working at 15, Warwick. I did. But yes, old bird I am. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Go down to 2. Everyone's dropped off, but if you watch it back, thank you to Warwick and Phil and Tiffany, my moderator extraordinaire. I don't know if Hayley was in. Thank you to Natalie and Gilly and my mum. I don't think there was any. And Tyler, I know he was here earlier. I don't know what happened with him. So thank you all so much. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you ever so much. Why are you asking anyway, Warwick? Why are you asking? Because I'm an old bird. Because yes, I am. But anyway, I'll see you all. I'll probably, if you are replying, I'm not going to say it now because I'm about to cut off. But I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I'm trying not to show my finger. Look, comment, subscribe, guys. Look, comment.